I didn't count this up, but I did count one column as 75, so that should mean around 300, over 300 pieces or prints to this train set. And I only have about 275. I think I'm missing some master layouts because some of the tiny pieces, like very large number of pipe clips that are all slightly different from each other, aren't called out in location. But most of the parts I've got. Today I want to talk about the tools because I'm going to show something. I'm going to talk about configurations using these tool sheets. These were individually made trains, about 9 of them, built one at a time, and they each got a custom set of tools shown on these 3 sheets right here, 1, 2, 3. This one just shows a screw jack, a rather hefty one with a 3 1/4 diameter screw, and then a transverse screw, so after you lift weight you can shift back and forth, and a couple turtle back ramps. These were just mounted to the engine you used when you needed them. The turtle back ramp sat on top of the front tender. The jack sat side by side here on the front tender, 2 of them, and 2 of them side by side on the rear tender. And they would have been used if you got a single axle off to help re-rail that track, or that axle back on the track. A lot of derailments aren't catastrophic derailments where the whole train leaves. It's a single axle. You have to stop and deal with it, or you could damage the axle, you could damage the track, or you could cause a catastrophic derailment of the whole car or the whole train if you don't deal with it when you know about it. So they would use these tools to help you get that fixed on site. This has a tallow can and a tallow distributor. Tallow is basically animal fat. The rest of them would have been oil. This one is, some of them are for specific purposes. Like this one specifically says it's to fill a torch lamp. And there's this general bucket. There's a test plate that isn't technically a tool that would be mounted on, and then a toolbox. What I want to talk about here are these 2 pieces. This lends itself to being done as a single piece in the design table. They're just wrenches, they're just tools. There's no real reason to have a whole bunch of files when one would do. So you could just have one file with 5 configurations. In this case, it lends itself to using something called a design table because it's already tabulated. And even though there's only a few variants, there's a large number of variables, around 29 variables for each variant. This one I'm going to use one file with 3 configurations, but I'm going to do it without using a design table. As opposed to doing this complex one today, I'm then going to look at doing this simple wrench that only has 3 instances, but about 7 variables per instance, as a common file with, in this case, using a design table. And again, this large number of wrenches here is a prime candidate for a design table, but these and the other wrenches on the other sheet are a bit complex. I'm going to stick to this today. So you can see creating various configurations with the design table and without it. For today, we want this. Now I've already done this, but I'm doing it again fresh for you. New part file. There's different ways you can do it. This is something I like to do, the way I like to do it. In this particular case, different parts are different. Now I want to call out a diameter, so I'm going to put in a construction line. In this case, those 2 equal, these 2 equal. And I see that wasn't a construction line, so I'm going to switch it there. Now I can call that as a radius. I know this bottom was 4 1/2. This top piece was 2 1/4. And this diameter was 1 1/8. And this diameter was 1 13/16. One other critical dimension, the way they call out the angle on this is over a 10-inch length. It would be a cone of 1 inch. And that sets your angle. There is one other dimension. If you look over here, right here, this is a half. That's a little less than a quarter, so this looks to be about an 1/8 to me. Here, here, and here. Here they're equal, here they're not. This is like about 3/16, ½ inch, 1/8 inch. So I'm going to do them separately. I'm going to put this 1/8 inch right in here. Because of the way I've opted to do this top and bottom, I can't really do it in there. I'll show you why in a minute. Well, I'll show you why right now. Suppose I make this an 1/8 inch. See, it's giving me a warning right here. A segment has a midpoint or equal length or equal distant relation. This is going to mess it up, basically, it's telling me. So I hit OK anyhow and do it. Well, you see something shifted that way. That shouldn't have happened. What's happened is it made this length and that length equal, not this length out to here. So I can't really do it that way on here, and that's okay. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Spin it about this, and there's number 16 done. Well, almost done. Remember I said we needed this radius, which I'm going to use an 1/8 and an 1/8 here. There, now it's done. Now I'm going to add a configuration, number 15 and the number 14. And I'm going to put them in order. So going from 16 to 15 is easy. We're in 16 now. Let's go over to 15. Right now it's the same as 16 and it isn't supposed to be. This is supposed to be 4 7/16. Double click it and we get the list where you change it. Before you change it, you want to hit configurations and tell it this change is only going to apply to this configuration only. And type in my 1 + 7/16. Updated. Everything else was the same. So there we go. 16, 15, and then 14 is quite a bit different. Now this one, I don't have to hit configuration again on this one. This one came up a little different. Not sure why it does this sometimes. Sometimes I get it this way, sometimes over here. But you see it's set to this configuration only, and it does it graphically also. It's already set to that because I changed it once in another configuration, so it's already unique in some of them. So it suspects something is up. Nowhere else is that going to be true. If I go in here to make this 3, you can see the configuration still set to all. So anything I'm doing it to for the first time, I have to go hit that, or it'll change them all. And I believe that's all that was different on this, on these parts. I want to make this one See, this does it like that one pop-up I got the one time because I'm changing something, a property of something. This only, and this one I want 3/16. So this remains an eighth, this changed to a half, and this is 3/16. Now this one has something different. It has this chord out piece, and it was 2 1/4 at the top, 3 at the bottom. This time I'm only doing it as a half value, and this was 375. Now in this case, since I didn't do my trick with the equal length construction line, but instead did half of it because I'm not going to have to do this again. This is the only configuration that uses it. In this case, I can go in and add this 1/2 inch. Because this isn't equal to something, I didn't get the error and it didn't cause a problem. And then the last thing I need to do is add this 1/16, or rather 1/8 inch internal. There we go. Now I got all three in one file. If I go to 15, you notice that's suppressed, and 14. Rather 16, I meant. You can see those are still suppressed. Not going to save this because I already have it. New file. Now for that wrench. I'm going to start out with a circle here and a circle here. If I touch the line, it becomes tangent. I think there's a hotkey to keep it from doing it, but just as easy to do that. I'm doing this first before I put any dimensions on because those are radiuses and I want it to default to radiuses because we're going to use the design table. I want to put my center line on the midpoint of the center. I believe on the first one, let's go take a look quick. 10 inches. Yep, 10 inches, number 13. And this is 1 1/8 radius, and this is 1 1/4 radius. Let's go do those. There's a 2-inch radius in this corner that's common to every one of these. Throw that in there. Now you see it can still go back and forth, but if I take any one of these points across the center line that should be symmetric and make them vertical, now they tie together, and this was 1 1/8. Last thing we need are hexes in here. It's point up so that these will be vertical. It doesn't set that automatically, so make them vertical. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to go back and set my value to 4 decimal places on my file, because you see there's 3 decimal places, but you see dividing this max min hitting the middle is going to give us, in this case, 1.1035. And down here, 1.3035. an interesting thing, it seems like a glitch to me. If you don't change this to 4 decimal places and you go into equations, it rounds it off. If you don't go into equations, it still remembers the other decimal places, even though they're not shown, and it just rounds. But when you go over to equations, it actually rounds off the value and it will change them. So it would have made this 1.1 if I hadn't made this 4, if I'd left it at 2 decimal places. So that's why I went and made it 4 before I go into the equations. And the reason I'm going into the equations, well, there's one thing I have left to do, and then I'll go into the equations. The thickness. I'm going to use mid-plane, and the first one is 3/8. And I'm going to add a 64th break on the edge, so it's not sharp edged. Doesn't really show, but it would be there. And I'm going to name this first configuration for what the thing's called, and it's a 5/8 key with a 3/4 key. You can't use a division sign in here, so we're going to do it this way. Okay, so then the next thing I want to do, tools, equations. This is where we get screwed up if I hadn't set that value. When we go to make our design table, we're not going to know what to put in it if we don't have stuff picked. And radius 1. And radius 2. Fixed 1. We're not going to change that. We don't want it in our design table. And this was key 1. Key 2. Those are our divided or our nominal values. Center line, middle values. And thick. And fixed 2. I just like to name all the stuff I don't have to deal with again as fixed and then sequential. So now when I go over and insert a design table, auto create, I can go through and pick. I'll know what I'm picking. Those 7 values are all that I need. If you accidentally click outside this window, it'll close it, and then you'll have to get back into it by hitting excuse me, by hitting edit table. So we're going to add a couple of more parts here. We're going to add the 7/8 1 and the 1/8 1 1/4. I know this next one was 15 and then 18. 1 foot 3, 1 foot 6. I'm going to go ahead and drag this over to my other window. You're not going to see it. One thing I'll point out, right here, 1 1/8, 1 1/8, 1 1/2. I don't know why they'd be the same, and then jump up a big amount. I believe this one should have been 1 1/4. Also right here, it seems to be an error. If you look at the format, I think this should be 2.070 with a spread of 6,000, because the max, as it's written, is smaller than the min. And that would be consistent with what they're doing on this side. So I'm going to correct this. This I'm going to enter as 2.067. Okay, other than that, I'm going to enter exactly what I see. So this one goes 1 1/4. eventually I need to enter some equations, and I don't want them coming out as dates, so I'm going to format these cells to be a number with 4 decimal places to, again, avoid the rounding problem, even though it's only going to pertain to these first 2. And you see we went 1.25. The next one is 1 7/16. You can't just enter it as 1/7 divided by 16 like you could in SolidWorks. You need to have that equal sign because this is within, it's using Excel as its kernel. And so we need that equal sign to make it an equation. But the ones where I know the number off the top of my head, I'm just entering it. And remember, this is where it says 1 1/8 on the sheet. But I think it should have been 1 1/4 right there. And then the first key is 1.4835. And the next one's a spread of 6, so it's 1.867. At the opposite end, it's 1.6735. And this is where I thought it was 2.067. And our thicknesses, they add 2/8 at each step, so this is 5/8. And this is 7/8. There, we're done. Click anywhere and it should update. Something didn't go right. That screwed me up. Okay. There we go. Now I got all my configurations. Small, medium, large. If you wanted to edit it, you can go edit table, edit your table. Change it here. Add rows if you wanted to. And it's done.